How about companies? The Apollo moon landing exemplified the cultural clash between the Horizon 3 innovation and Horizon 1 bureaucracy. And as an expert on corporate innovation, what lessons should large companies draw from this history to avoid stifling their disruptive projects and effectively integrate them into established systems? There's a great story, I think, at the Apollo moon landing.
Yeah, so, the Apollo moon landing was certainly a disruptive set of activities. And the story is when they landed back in the Pacific Ocean, and got helicoptered to both the United States, they had to fill out a customs form of where they've been, and what they're bringing back. And so, where'd you travel to? Moon. What are you bringing back? Rocks. And then they had to fill out an expense form, where you would get paid for mile. They wanted to get paid per mile. And the government said, no, we'll pay you by day. So, because they thought if they got paid per mile, they went 250,000 miles one way and back, 500,000 miles in total. They would have been very rich, but instead they got $10 a day for expenses because they were in the military. But back to your question, what's really interesting is companies are just, organizational constructs to focus on repeatable process. So in the beginning, every large company was a startup searching for a business model. That is the distinction between a startup and a large company, is the large companies get large by executing known business models. It's a fancy term for a business model is, who are my customers, what pricing, what's the right distribution channel, what's the right supply chain, etc. But startups aren't executing business models, they're searching for them. This distinction between search and execution had never been articulated before we started talking about the lean startup. But if you think about startups, large companies executing business models, they innovate, but they tend to innovate around their core businesses, around core products and services. It's not that large companies aren't innovative, but the innovation tends to go, maybe I'll make the product in a new color, or maybe I'll change the price, or have a more effective supply chain. And good companies do this all the time. Better companies actually figure out that maybe I could take the same products or services and maybe sell it to a different channel or a different customer set. Or maybe even more sophisticated, I could use my manufacturing capacity to build something else, but I have these great factories. I could maybe build, additional things out of that same factory. But that's not disruption. Disruption is actually thinking about new categories that never existed before, or new combinations of products. And that's really hard inside of existing functional units like engineering or sales or marketing, or worse, inside of product line divisions that have profit and loss based on existing products. And smart companies have figured out that, and this started with Clayton Christensen when he wrote not only The Innovator's Dilemma, The Innovator's Solution, is that you really need to keep disruptive organizations at first outside of the mainstream of the organization, because those people operate not only with different ideas, but different culture, different speed, and more importantly, different approaches to risk. You need those risks you take to be essentially fail safe, meaning you don't want to destroy your core business with an experiment. But in the disruptive organization, you want the experiments and the culture to be safe to fail. That is, you want to be able to say, well, that didn't work and we didn't damage a business. And the best example of this is SpaceX. SpaceX today is launching rockets on an operational cadence from 3 launch pads about every 3.5 days. Over 100 rockets a year will go up this year. And so that is operational excellence. They do not run experiments, at least on a big scale, on those rockets. That Falcon 9, there is a crew that knows how to wheel it out, plug it in, launch it, check it out, etc. But there's another group in Texas that's building something incredibly disruptive at SpaceX called Starship. And Starship has basically exploded 3 times, each time getting better and further into space. And each time they're learning massive things. That is not operational cadence. That is, in fact, a disruptive organization learning by experimentation rapidly, about 10x more rapid than a traditional NASA program to make a moon rocket. Well, what's really interesting is those are not disconnected programs. The Falcon 9 people are teaching the Starship people, hey, we wish we would have put the access panel over here. And the Starship people are teaching the Falcon 9 people, you know, those engine chamber pressures, you could probably crank them up another 2% and you'd get another couple hundred pounds or 1,000 pounds of payload without really screwing up the rocket. So they do interact. And most important lesson for corporations, that disruptive thing going on in Texas, that Starship, that's eventually going to be the company's core product. Right now, it's on the edge. Innovation always occurs on the edge for disruptive innovation. And when it succeeds, it moves into the core and eventually replaces and becomes the next generation product line. CEOs who can manage sustaining and disruptive innovation simultaneously, it's a real art. And most companies kind of either fail to do that and their product life cycle and company life cycle, goes like this, or they kind of do acquisitions of, well, we're not creative enough to do it inside. So why don't we buy a division or an innovative and disruptive company? Not a bad idea, but that integration of the two is really difficult. Or we could acquire people or intellectual property, etc. So the answer to your very long answer to a short question is companies have a kind of a life cycle. When you're in the middle of one, you think corporations last forever. Most corporations, at least nowadays, maybe last 15 to 20 years. The outliers maybe last 50. They fail because they fail to do this continual cycle of reinvention. I forgot what your question was.